concerning Joseph and his brothers being separated, and now what have they done? They've come back together. Okay, Joseph, he had his sons Ephraim and Manasseh. Okay, Benjamin, and then you have Judah. Even the nation of Israel was divided between the northern tribes and the southern tribes. You have Ephraim and Judah. And in the Haftorah portion, it's all about the two sticks coming together as one. And so it perfectly ties in with our Torah portion where Joseph is reunited with Judah and his brothers. And here in Ezekiel 37, it's all about the two sticks coming together and becoming one. To really understand Ezekiel's prophecy, the groundwork of the history of ancient Israel must first be laid. After the reign of King Solomon, the nation of Israel split into two kingdoms. The southern kingdom, represented by, in the south by the tribes of Judah, Simeon, Benjamin, and some of the Levites, known as the stick of Judah. And then the northern kingdom, which was represented by the other tribes, was called the stick of Ephraim, coming from Joseph. But because of idolatry, God broke the bonds of the brotherhood between Judah and Joseph. Look at this here in Ezekiel 37. It says, the word of the Lord came again to me, saying, moreover, thou son of man, take you one stick and write upon it for Judah, and for the children of Israel his companions. Then take another stick and write upon it for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and for all the house of Israel his companions, and join them one to another into one stick, and they shall become one in your hand. Now this is amazing. When you see the Haftorah this weekend, is Israel becoming what? One.
France is trying to revive peace talks between Israelis and Palestinians. It hosted an international conference in an attempt to restart discussions since April 2014. Foreign ministers and officials from 28 countries and international organizations attended the gathering in Paris. The Israelis and Palestinians were not invited. The participants wrapped up their meeting by issuing a statement. It said, all delegates present reaffirmed the need for a negotiated two-state solution in which Palestine and Israel can peacefully coexist. The participants also agreed to come up with measures through working-level talks to move the peace process forward. They then plan to propose the measures by the end of the year at the earliest, with a meeting at which both Israelis and Palestinians are present. Palestinians have welcomed the French initiative, but Israeli officials have said such an international conference could hinder a dialogue for peace.
Israel says it is reducing ties with nations that voted for last week's UN Security Council resolution, which demanded a halt to Israeli settlement building in Palestinian territory. A foreign ministry spokesperson said Israel was temporarily reducing visits to and cooperation with embassies of affected nations. Israeli media have reported that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has asked officials to visit the countries that voted for the resolution as little as possible. The UN resolution, which was adopted on Friday, is the first since 1979 to condemn Israel over its settlement policy.
There is more fallout tonight from that UN Security Council vote on Friday, which condemned Israel's building of settlements. The Israelis confirmed today that they've suspended working ties with 12 of the nations that backed the resolution. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will not meet with their foreign ministers, and the Israeli foreign minister will not receive their ambassadors. Meanwhile, President-elect Trump again tweeted his own criticism of the United Nations this evening. He said it has great potential, but for now it's, quote, just a club for people to get together, talk, and have a good time. And he added, so sad. Mr. Trump had urged the Obama administration to veto the Israel resolution instead of abstaining.
Still fuming over Friday's UN vote declaring Israeli settlements illegal, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu escalated his attacks against the Obama administration.
Friends don't take friends to the Security Council.
Summoning the U.S. ambassador and accusing President Obama and Secretary of State Kerry of orchestrating what he called a shameful ambush at the UN, telling his cabinet he has ironclad proof.
From the information that we have no doubt that the Obama administration initiated it, stood behind it, coordinated on the wording, and demanded that it be passed.
The White House denies that, calling the claim absurd.
We did not draft it. We did not put it forward.
The Obama administration maintains the UN vote was a last resort, after struggling for the past 8 years to convince Israel to halt settlement construction on occupied lands the Palestinians claim for their state.
For years, we've seen an acceleration in the growth of these settlements. And frankly, if these current trends continue, the two-state solution is going to be impossible.
An advisor to Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas agreed.
This is not a resolution against Israel. This is a resolution against Israel's expansion. The move was just to really save us and Israel and borrow time and craft our way towards the future.
But for Israel, that future is uncertain. Officials now worry that with UN backing, Palestinians will push for sanctions, boycotts, and take Israeli soldiers to the International Criminal Court.
What this resolution just did is it gave the Palestinians ammunition in their diplomatic and legal war against Israel. And the United States not only didn't stop it, they were behind it.
Netanyahu now putting his hopes in President-elect Donald Trump, who condemned the UN vote this weekend on Twitter, saying it, quote, will make it much harder to negotiate peace.
I look forward to working with those friends and with the new administration when it takes office next month.
Let's look at Ezekiel 37, 34 through 28. This is part of the Haftorah portion. It says, David, my servant, will be king over them. They shall all have one shepherd. They'll also walk in my judgments. They're going to observe my statutes, and they're going to do them. And they're going to dwell in the land that I have given to Jacob, my servant, wherein your fathers have dwelt. And they'll dwell there, even they and their children's children, for how long? And he says, and my servant David will be their prince forever. Moreover, I'm going to make a covenant of peace with them. It'll be an everlasting covenant with them. And I will place them and multiply them. But look at this. And I will set my sanctuary in the midst of them forevermore. That is incredible. My tabernacle also will be with them. I will be their God. They'll be my people. And all the heathen or non-Jews are going to know that I am the Lord. I sanctify who? Israel. And when is he going to sanctify them? When my sanctuary shall be in the midst of them forevermore. Now, what's amazing to me is when you think about it, if I believe it's like a prophetic timeline. In the first half of Ezekiel 37, you have the valley of dry bones, okay, coming to life. This represents the Holocaust, Israel becoming a nation, being born in a day. Then the second half of Ezekiel 37, you have Israel coming together as one stick. And then the very next chapter, Ezekiel 38, the Gog-Magog war is the next thing on the horizon. You following me? How this timeline comes. Okay, as a matter of fact, look at Ezekiel 38, 1 through 3, right after Ezekiel 37. The word of the Lord came to me, saying, Son of man, set your face against Gog, the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against him and say, Thus says the Lord God, behold, I'm against you, O Gog, chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. Okay, well, this verse is speaking of the end times, the Gog and Magog war.
The prophecy, the great Jewish prophecy of Gog and Magog is materializing right before our eyes, and it's really important that we recognize it. This prophecy is said by Zechariah and Yecheskel, two of the great Jewish prophets. We read about it every year during the holiday of Sukkot. It's mentioned in the Rambam as one of the events that will occur in conjunction with the arrival of Mashiach. It's also brought in the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, which explains the reason why we read this prophecy at the time of Sukkot is because the time of Sukkot will play a role in how it all unfolds. The basic gist of the prophecy is that the nations of the world will come and try and take half of Jerusalem away from the Jewish people. They will say that it doesn't belong to us. And through this great confrontation, which will involve all the nations of the world in some form, it will reach a crescendo. And through this crescendo of confrontation will come revelation, will come Mashiach's arrival, will come the final recognition that there's a creator and there's a God and there's a purpose. And that will lead to the time of redemption, to the time of peace and harmony among all men. So this is the last great barrier before we reach redemption, and it's materializing and happening right before our eyes. This UN Security Council resolution and the meeting that's going to take place in France on January 15th, which Reuters has described as a meeting between all 70 nations, is clearly telling us that it's occurring. the Rebbe explains that Gog and Magog has the numerical value of 70. 70 is the Torah's number of how many nations there are, even though there could be many more countries and many nations, but the idea of 70 is the primary. And the reason why Gog and Magog has to be this idea of all the nations is because this is the final rectification. The final rectification of the exile, which will lead into the time of great peace and redemption and unity between all mankind. When the peace process was picking up steam, the Rebbe spoke about it again as a continuous fulfillment of this Gog and Magog, Psalm number 2, that the nations are in an uproar trying to take the land of Israel away from the Jewish people. And the Rebbe said, this is a sign of redemption. This is a sign that Mashiach is close. And he cited Rashi, that Rashi says Psalm number 2 is talking about Gog and Magog, which is the final sort of confrontation, this energy versus Mashiach.
Hey guys, it's Rick. I just wanted to jump back in here. I can't seem to get away from the subject of this resolution, UN Security Council Resolution 2334. On the heels of that, on January 15th, there will be a meeting of some 70 nations in Paris to decide a two-state solution for Israel and Palestine. But I ran across a couple things I wanted to share with you. This paragraph here, paragraph 3. The United Nations Security Council condemns all measures aimed at altering the demographic composition, character, and status of the Palestinian territory occupied since 1967. That's unreal. Including East Jerusalem, including inter alia, the construction and expansion of settlements, transfer of Israeli settlers, confiscation of land, demolition of homes, and displacement of Palestinian civilians in violation of international humanitarian law. United Nations Security Council reiterates its demand that Israel immediately and completely cease all settlement activities in the Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem. Now, they're telling Israel that they can't build anything near the pre-1967 borders. Now, there's a bunch of settlements that are there now. I'm wondering if this upcoming meeting in Paris, what's going to happen with those settlements. And, of course, the people that are living there. The UN Security Council underlies that it will not recognize any changes to the 4 June 1967 lines. Otherwise, they are saying that prior to the 1967 borders, the 1968 war where Israel retook their land, they're saying that it is illegal in international law. January 15th, 70 nations will gather in Paris to discuss the creation of a Palestinian state. What's interesting is that representatives from 70 different countries will gather in Paris, France for an unprecedented global conference. Now, the stated goal of this conference is to promote a two-state solution as the way that lasting peace will be brought through the Middle East. Well, if a two-state solution is going to bring peace, then what are they going to do about the Sunni and Shia wars? It's unbelievable, folks. It's unbelievable. In Israel, there's a tremendous amount of concern that whatever is agreed upon at this conference will immediately be used as the basis for another UN security resolution that would permanently divide the land of Israel and Jerusalem and create a Palestinian state.
Okay, here we go. January 15th, approximately 70 nations are going to gather in France, and they're going to try to force a two-state solution. I told you this is why Obama should never abstain. You vote, you veto, say, no, guys. No. You're not going to do that. We're going to let Israel and the Palestinians sit down and work out their own agreement. Why would the whole world need to do this? Why do we need to force this? They can work this out. It's up to them anyway. We're not going to force it, so it's not going to vote. But no, Obama didn't do that. He allowed the vote in the Security Council to be voted 14-0, with the United States being a hypocrite and abstaining, and that's because of the Obama administration. Now, guess what? Paris, France, the representatives from approximately 70 nations. You know, there was a young Jewish boy that had a near-death experience. He had a vision, and he saw a lot of different things in it. Some of it have come to pass, some of it hasn't. But one of the things he saw was that 70 nations would come against Israel. Well, this is unbelievable. Representatives from approximately 70 countries will gather in France on January 15th, just 5 days before Obama leaves office. They are rushing this, folks. They're going to hold a conference to throw the international community's weight behind a two-state solution in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Neither Israel nor the Palestinians will be even present at the meeting. But France intends to invite the Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to come to Paris, and sometime afterward, after this summit is done, it's called a peace summit. It's only going to do is bring division. It's going to bring division. It's going to bring a war is what it's going to bring. After they have this peace summit in which they're going to come down on Israel, then the French are going to brief the Palestinians and the Israelis on what they've decided and what's the outcome of the talks, how the world is turning against Israel. And then they'll probably bring this resolution to the United Nations for a vote. Are you serious? This should have never, ever happened. But it has. And it's right out of the pages of your Bible. And you got to see Psalms 83 is coming to pass. They're coming against Israel. Zechariah 2, they're touching the apple of God's eye to try to spoil it, to divide it. Zechariah 12, it's coming to pass.
Israel fears American-French initiative in Paris conference before Obama leaves office. Jerusalem concerned that foreign ministers meeting in Paris, scheduled for January 15th, will result in a Security Council vote on the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. Now it's just interesting because this meeting was supposed to take place back in June of 2016, but was then pushed back all the way to January of 2017. How very timely indeed. Now the actual article goes on to say that Israel fears that the US and France want to advance another move on the Israeli-Palestinian issue before the Obama administration wraps up its term. A senior official in Jerusalem said that during Sunday's Security Cabinet meeting, ministers were presented with an assessment that during the International Foreign Ministers meeting that's scheduled for January 15th in Paris, as part of the French Peace Initiative, a series of decisions on the peace process will be made, and one of those decisions has to do with whether or not a two-state solution will be made. But then it goes on to say that these will immediately be brought to the UN Security Council for a vote and will be adopted there before January 20th, before Mr. Obama is quote-unquote supposed to be leaving office.
Again, tomorrow is the 10th of Tevet. It is all about Jerusalem being under siege. Now, if you'll notice, I have the Capitol Hill, the White House, whatever, over on the 20th of January. That's the inauguration day. But look what next Sunday is, the 15th of January, is the 17th of Tevet. Okay, so tomorrow is the very day where Nebuchadnezzar besieged Jerusalem. Okay, and he had a divide and conquer mentality. Well, what do we see today? The leader of the United States and the United Nations, okay, who is a type of Nebuchadnezzar. Look at this right here. This Paris conference is planned next Sunday, the 15th, and Israel is still furious. And like I showed you last week, I want to point out there are 70 nations that are coming together, okay, to condemn Israel, and they may very well arbitrarily proclaim a Palestinian state. So this weekend, God is saying Israel is to be one stick and one nation, and the United Nations are saying, no, they're to be two states. I don't know if you caught that. This is incredible that this Torah portion this weekend, next weekend, and then what the United Nations is doing a few weekends ago and this next weekend. Here the appointed scripture reading for this appointed time from the prophets tells us that Israel is to be one. So when it talks about these 70 nations meeting this next Sunday, and they're part of the United Nations, many believe that that speaks of Gog and Magog, because Gog and Magog, the phrase totals 70. 70 nations. When God divided the nations in Genesis 10, he divided into 70 nations. During the Feast of Tabernacles, Israel was to kill 70 bulls, one for each nation. Here we have 70 nations coming to the Paris Mideast Conference this next Sunday. And Gog and Magog totals 70, that phrase. So do you see the connection? Now, I want to show you something else that is fascinating. I mentioned this almost 8 years ago when this happened. This is from 1917, okay? I don't know how many of you ever heard of the Balfour Declaration, okay? World War I, okay? And here we see it was in 1917 that Israel was to become a nation. It didn't happen then, but they declared that there should be a state for the Jewish people. That happened in 1917. Exactly 50 years later, what do we happen? In the Jubilee, we have 1967, and Israel recaptures Jerusalem. This is very significant. And then another 50 years later, or 100 years later, we now, from 1917, we're now in 2017. Okay, could we see something very biblically prophetic happen? 1917 was very biblically prophetic. 50 years later, 1967 was very biblically prophetic. 50 years later, we're at 2017, the 50th anniversary of recapturing Jerusalem. And this is what I was talking about in the book that I wrote on blood moons, was just the fact that here, I was saying in 2014, 2015, we have these total lunar eclipses on Passover, Sukkot, 2 years in a row, and they were signs of what was going to be coming. I never said anything would happen on those dates. I said it concerned Israel and what was coming. And look what's happened this last year. And look what is about to happen this year.
The Paris Conference will discuss future peace agreement in the Middle East. One thing we all know for sure, this is not the way to reach peace agreements. Israel has a proven record of reaching peace agreements throughout only one formula, direct negotiation. Trying to avoid that is creating a very harmful illusion to the Palestinian side. Unfortunately, the only country that the pressure is on is Israel. The only country that says time after time, we call Abu Mazen to sit and negotiate. And Abu Mazen doesn't come because he wants the dynamics of internationalization of the conflict. That's the reason Israel says that the Paris Conference will distance peace, won't do anything in order to reach true and real peace in the region.